Hello, BookTube. This is Alan. Going to do a reading from Century Magazine, bound volume that I have, and this is entitled Matthew Arnold's Criticism, and the author of this piece is John Burroughs. Readers who knew Matthew Arnold only as an occasional contributor to British periodical literature or as a lecturer during his brief tour in this country in the fall and winter of 1883 to 84 will do well before they make up their minds about him to give him a hearing as he appears in his collective works recently published by Macmillan and Company. A writer who has a distinct and well-defined point of view of his own, like Arnold, suffers by being read fragmentarily or by the single essay or discourse. His effect is cumulative. He hits a good many times the same place, and his work as a whole makes a deeper impression than any single essay of his would seem to warrant. He is not, in any sense, one of those random and capricious minds that often cut such a brilliant figure in periodical literature. But the distinguished thing about him is that he stands for a definite and well-grounded idea or principle, an idea which gives a certain unity and simplicity to his entire work. The impression that a fragmentary and disillusionary reading of Arnold is apt to give one, namely that he is one of the squatters, a man of a high look and a proud heart, gladly wears away as one grows familiar with the main current of his teaching. He does not, indeed, turn out to be a large, hearty, magnetic man, but he proves to be a thoroughly serious and noble one, whose calmness and elevation are of great value. His writings are now published to uniform edition, embracing 10 volumes of wit, 2 volumes of poetry, and 2 volumes of literary essay and criticism, in a volume made up of Celtic literature, and an old translation, Homer, a volume of mixed essays, mainly on the Irish themes, a volume called Culture and Anarchy, and a Friendship Garland, mainly essays in political and social criticism, 3 volumes of religious criticism, namely Literature and Dogma, God in the Bible, and St. Paul and Protestantism, with last essays and 1 volume of Discourse in America. He would play the role of a disinterested observer. Apropos of his political and social criticism, he says, I do not profess to be a politician, but simply one of this interested class of observers, who, with no organization and body set of supporters to please, set themselves to observe honestly and to report fully the state and prospects of our civilization. He urges that criticism in England has been too directly polemical and controversial. That is to have been made to subserve interests not its own, the interests of the party, or of a sect, or of a theory, or some practical and secondary consideration. His own efforts have been to restore it to its pure intellectual sphere, and to keep his high aim constantly before him. The spirit in which he approaches Butler's analogy is a fair sample of the spirit in which he approaches most of these themes. Elsewhere, I have remarked what advantage Butler had against the deist of his own time in the line of argument which he chose. But how does his argument in itself stand the scrutiny of one who has no counter-thesis, such as that of the deist, to make good against Butler? How does it affect one who has no wish at all to doubt or cavil like the loose writs of fashionable society who angered Butler. Still less any wish to mock, but who comes to the analogy with the honest desire to receive from it anything he finds he could use. Arnold is predominantly a critical force, a force of clear reason, steady discernment. He is not an author whom we read for man's sake or for the favors of his personality, but this is not always agreeable, but for his own unfailing intellect and certain acumen. Elsewhere in his books, we are brought under an influence of a mind which indeed does not fail and delate us, but which clears our vision, which sets going on a process of crystallization in our thoughts and brings our knowledge of a certain range of subjects to a higher state of cleanliness and purity. This is a long article, so I'm just going to read kind of snippets of it. Culture, he says, giving vent to his Hellenism, is a like spirit with poetry, follows one law with poetry. The dominant idea of poetry is the idea of beauty and of human nature perfect in all sides. This idea is the Greek idea. Human life, he says, in the hands of Hellenism, is invested with a kind of aerial ease, clearness, and radiancy. It is full of what we call sweetness and light. The best art and poetry of the Greeks, he says, in which religion and poetry are one, and which the idea of beauty and of human nature project perfect almost as this nature perfect on all sides adds to itself a religious and devout energy, and works in the strength of that is on this account of such surpassing interest and instructiveness for us. But Greece failed us because the moral and religious fiber of humanity was not braced and developed also. And this is from Matthew Arnold. But grace did not err in having the idea of beauty, harmony, and complete human perfection so present and paramount. It is impossible to have this idea too present and paramount. Only the moral fiber must be braced too. And we, because we have braced the moral fiber, are not on that account in the right way. If at the same time the idea of beauty, harmony, and complete human perfection is wanted or misapprehended against among us, and evidently it is wanting or misapprehended at present. And when we rely, as we do, on our religious organizations, which in themselves do not and cannot give us this idea, and think we have done enough, if we make them spread and prevail, then I say we fall into our common fault, overvaluing machinery. His ideas of portraiture expressed in the preface to poems in 1853 is essentially Greek, and they led him to exclude from the collection his long poem called Epistolus on Ethan, because the poem was deficient in the classical requirements of action. He says, the radical difference between the poetic theory of the Greeks and our own is this, that with them the poetical character of the action in itself and the conduct of it was the first consideration. With us, attention is fixed mainly on the value of the separate thoughts and images which occur in the treatment of action. They regard the whole. We regard the parts. We have poems which seem to exist merely for the sake of single lines and passages, not for the sake of producing any total immersion. We have critics who seem to direct their attention merely to detach expressions to the language almost about the action, not to the action itself. I really think that the majority of them do not, in their hearts, believe that there is such a thing as total impression to be derived from a poem at all, or to demand from a poet. They think that the term a commonplace of metaphysical criticism. They will permit the poet to select any action he pleases, and to suffer that action to go as it will, providing it gratifies them with occasional bursts of fine writing and with a shower of isolated thoughts and images. That is, they permitted him to leave their poetical sense ungratified, providing that he gratifies their rhetorical sense and their curiosity. He says to bring up children up in the kind of order of licensed vicatilism or of bagmatism is not a wise training to give children. The heads and representatives of nations should teach them better, but they do nothing of the kind. On the contrary, they extol the energy and self-reliance of the licensed victaliators or commercial travelers and predict full success others from their schools. John Bull is suspicious of centralization, bureaucracy, state authority, which carry things with such a high hand on the continent. Anything that threatens or seems to threaten is an individual liberty he stands clear of. The sense of the nation spoke in the words later uttered through the times by Sir Aubrey Herbert. He says, all great state systems stultify. You cannot make the state apparent without the logical consequences of making the people children. Official regulations and free mental participation of what is right and wise do not and cannot coexist. I see no possible way in which you can reconcile these great state services and the condition under which men have to make true progress in themselves. But to preach such notions in England, Arnold would say, is like carrying coals to Newcastle. They would be of more service in France, where state action is excessive. In England, the dangers are the other way. Our dangers are in exaggerating the blessings of self-will and self-assertion, and not being ready enough to sink our imperfectly formed self-will in view of a larger general result. There seems to be nothing in Hellenistic that suggests Catholicism, and yet evidently it is Arnold's classical feeling for institutes that give him his marked Catholic bias. The Catholic Church is a great institution, the greatest and oldest in the world, and makes it always had made short work of the individual. It is cold, stately, and impartial, says Emerson. In a long time it has blended with everything in heaven above and earth beneath, and moves through a zodiac of feasts and fasts, names every day of the year, every town and market and headland and monument, and has coupled itself with the almanac, that no court can be held, no field plowed, nor horse shod, without some leave from the church. It appeals to Arnold by reason of these things, that it appeals to him by reason of his great names as poets, artists, statesmen, preachers, scholars, its opposing ritual, its splendid architecture, its culture. It's been the conservator of letters. For centuries, the priests were only scholars, and the ceremonial is kind of petrified literature. Arnold clearly speaks for himself, or from his own bias, when he says that the man of imagination, the philosopher too, in spite of her propensity to burn them, will always have a weakness for the Catholic Church. It is because of the rich treasures of human life which have been stored within her pale. And a good sample of his power to pluck out the heart of the secret of man's influence may be found in his essay on Wordsworth. Wordsworth's poetry is great because of the extraordinary power for which Wordsworth feels the joy offered to us in nature, the joy offered to us in simple elementary affections and duties. Is because of the extraordinary power with which, in case after case, he shows us this joy and renders it so as to make us share it. A recent English reviewer said that there were only but 2 English authors of the present day whose works are preeminent for quality of style, namely John Morley's and Cardinal Newman's. But one would say that the man of all others among recent English writers who had in preeminent degree the gift of what we call style, that quality in literature which is like the sheen of a bird's plumage, was Matthew Arnold. That Morley had this quality is by no means so certain. Morley is a vigorous, brilliant, versatile writer, but his quality is not distinctively literary. Arnold's work is like cut glass. It is not merely clear, it has a distinction, a prestige which belongs to it, but by the reason of the delicate individuality of style. The writings of Cardinal Newman have much of the same qualities. These utmost lucidity combined with a fresh, distinct literary flavor. They are pervaded by sweet, warm, winsful spirit than Arnold's. There is none of the score, contemptuous, and silliness, superciliousness, in them that have given so much offense in Arnold. And while his style is not so crisp as the latter's, it is perhaps more marvelously flexible and magnet. One of the great problems in reading something that's over 100 years old, you'll get a lot of words that are rarely ever used in today's term. Arnold's reliance upon the near and obvious reasons and his distrust of metaphysical subtitles and curious refinements are so consistent that he has been accused of parading the commonplace. But the commonplace, when used with uncommon cleverness and aptness, is always the most telling. He thinks the great weakness of Christianity at the present time is its reliance, or pretended reliance, upon the preternatural. And the whole burden of his own effort in this field is to show its basis upon common sense, upon the universal need and the want of mankind. Excuse me. For initiation, for Ignatius, for abstruse reasons, Arnold has no taste at all, either in religion, in literature, and politics, and the mass of readers will sympathize with them. The meaning of the name metaphysics, he says, lo, essence, existence, substance, finite and infinite, cause and cessation, something and nothing, begin to weave the internal dance before us with the confused murmur of their combinations, filling all the region governed by her who, far more indisputably than her late-born rival, political economy, has earned the title of divine science. What a garland draws by the hand of frozen Prussian friend Arminius upon the brow of Hepworth Dixon in characterizing his style as middle-class Machiavellianism. I call it Machiavellianism, says the pendant, because it's the same internal and external characteristics as Machiavelli's style, the external characteristics being a hard, metallic movement with nothing of the soft play of life, and the internal characteristics being a perpetual semblance of hitting the right nail on the head without the reality. And I call it middle class Machiavellianism because it has these faults without the compensation of great studies and conversance with great affairs by which Machiavelli partly redeemed them. But the hand of another character he crowned Mrs. Sale thus. But his career and genius have given him somehow the secret of literary mixture, novel and fascinating to the last degree. He blends the airy Epicureanism of the salons of Augustus with the full-bodied gaiety of our English cider cellar. Most of the London newspapers do receive their garland. That of the Times is most taken. Nay, often this enthusiast continues getting excited as he goes on. The Times itself, which so stirs some people's indignation. What is the Times but a gigantic Sancho Panza, following but an attraction he cannot resist, that poor man's scorn, suffering, sublime enthusiasts, the modern spirit, following it, indeed, with constant grumbling, expostulation, and opposition, with airs of protection, of compassionate superiority, with its insistent play of nods, shrugs, and winks, addressed to the spectators following it. In short, with all the incurable recalcitrancy of the lower nature, but still following it. Almost to the end here. His recent utterance upon us and our civilization seems to me just for timely. They are in keeping with the general drift of his teaching, and could not well be other than they are. That beauty and distinction, reverence and truthfulness, humility and good manners are at a low ebb in this country. Who can deny it? And that our newspaper press partakes of this condition and is in measure responsible for it. Who can deny that? Moreover, the questions of culture, of right, reason, of just means of measure to all things are always vital questions, and no man of our time has spoken so clear, so enforceably a word upon them as has Matthew Arnold. Thank you for listening.